And hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Hairy Man Hoaxes and Hoodwinks. I'm glad you're all here. We got a great show for you this afternoon, okay? I've got some I'm talking about rock star guests coming on today, and you all love them. So I'm so glad to see everybody here. Look at that. We're already at 17, and we're building. Judy and My Eyes and Cindy, welcome everybody. Joe, I seen Joe. Joe, were you the first one in? I think you were. Jay Fritz, hello, my friend. Brian and Chewy, Gary Johnson, Cindy, Mr. Lee, welcome. Val Southwest, Sharon. Hey, I see you guys. Okay, I know you're here, and I appreciate it. And we are going to get on with bringing on our guests. Of course, I'm going to save the best for last today, and we'll bring him on at the end. But right now,
planetary powers activate.
Woo! There's my buddy Brent. He's in the house.
Found my headset too.
Oh, look at that!
Look, all nice and fancy now.
That's what we're used to. Well, thanks for being here. It is appreciated.
Oh, thanks for having me. Looks like it's gonna be great. Yeah, good guests, and I'm really excited for this one.
For sure. So of course. Thomas Steenberg, welcome, sir.
There he is.
Hello, Nikki. Hello, Brent. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. It's been a good day. Off and on showers outside, cooled down. I like that, except for the mosquito part, but everything else is okay.
Well, I'm looking forward to today's show because I always like getting updated my old stomping grounds, Alberta.
Yep, for sure. Let's bring on Mr. Leon, Bigfoot Okanagan.
I love Thomas's entrance, especially. I like that.
We'll get you one, man.
We need to get some more. Yes.
Only Sasquatch Okanagan.
Yes.
And I thought I had a clapping one, but I must have taken it out at some point because I want a crowd, when people come on.
Like a crowd.
Because like Thomas says there, I mean, I'm from Alberta originally too, so I'm just I lived a couple of hours away from Keenan and the Nordic area where those guys were all investigating and stuff. So it's kind of interesting and I haven't seen them I said to him earlier, it's good to see you online finally. I mean, I had seen them about 3 years ago, last time I saw him, so in person. So it's good to see him today. So he looks good today too. He looked like a geriatric towards like the Mookquaw crew. I'm certain whether we about the geriatric crew because we're all getting injured. So anyway, go ahead.
And here we have Mr. Bill Reid. Welcome.
What's up? Yes.
How are you,
guys?
Bill?
How are y'all doing? I'm doing fine. Unlike my compadres, I'm born and raised in BC, so never lived anywhere else.
Mm.
He's a West Coast boy, born and bred.
Ooh.
That's good. I mean, look at this. I've got the whole Canadian crew here, so it's pretty cool. I like it. So today, you guys, we have a great show for you. We have the Alberta Sasquatch organization. Okay,
Yes.
with Mr. Keenan Geiger. He's going to be coming on. He's got a small group of knowledgeable Bigfoot enthusiasts that have made it their mission to chronicle the existence of the creature known as Sasquatch in the Providence, Alberta, Canada. So they have a wealth of eyewitness sightings and reports and encounters from locations including Banff, Jasper, Nordegg, Waterton. Oh my gosh. And then this one, Kananaskis. Is that how you say it?
Kananaskis.
Kananaskis. Okay.
Kananaskis.
I trust you. And from all over the Providence. Or Providence. Sorry, not Providence. But
Americans.
us silly Americans in our terminology.
Hey, I could give you a couple of Texas towns I bet you could not pronounce. So Keenan was born and raised in Lethbridge and now calls Calgary his home. He comes from a military background with 13 years of experience in the Canadian Armed Forces and is an avid year-round fly fisherman. He is a graduate of the University of Lethbridge and now works as a contractor in industrial occupational health and safety. Keenan's fascination with the subject of Sasquatch came from a childhood introduction with the topic, but his curiosity was solidified with a strange and unexplained experience he had while remote fly fishing trip north of Coleman in his late 20s. He is primarily interested with preserving the history of reports in the province and function as the team's webmaster and social media manager. Believing that there is tremendous value in the culture of impact of alleged Sasquatch encounters, he strives to bring his inquisitive but discerning skeptical mindset to the Alberta Sasquatch organization in hopes of preserving this important part of our heritage of future Albertans. So with that, I'd like to bring on Mr. Keenan Geiger. Welcome.
Ooh, hey.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So welcome to the
Best we
show. Let's see if I can do this. Boom. So I went to your site, and what a great site. I mean, it was so much stuff on this site. And by the way, all the links to everybody's stuff is down in the description, the Alberta Sasquatch, which is the sasquatchalberta.com, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You can either get to us from albertasasquatch.com or sasquatchalberta.com. I tried to make it as foolproof as possible.
It was too, because I got all confused. I'm like, wait a minute, didn't I put it the other way before? And it still worked. So
Well, no matter how you put in the word Alberta and Sasquatch, it'll come up.
yeah, it was pretty good. But man, that site you had a Bigfoot blog, Facebook feedback, articles, editorials, expedition diary, Indigenous outlook, sightings report, sightings map, classic encounters, syndicated reports, the Steenberg shorts,
Nice.
video galleries, and public events. It was like, really, really. I hope you didn't hear my husband's TV. Oh my God. He's got that thing so loud. Anyway, it was great. So let's go back to what started you out. What was your come to finding Bigfoot and your experiences? What made you get the itch?
Sure. Yeah, I'll break it down into two different life events. The kind of like the childhood piece, that's that introduction, and then more of the contemporary part where it became kind of a part of my life. And also thank you very much for the compliments on the website. We think that we actually have one of the better Bigfoot Sasquatch websites on the internet. We did do a job, a particularly diligent job when we first created it as well, to make sure that it was a one-stop shop for reputable information that was free to access. It's not bogged down with advertisements or people trying to sell you stuff either too. So we hopefully did a good job with that, and we hope everyone has a chance to visit it at some point. So as far as my kind of personal introduction into the topic of Bigfoot Sasquatch, I feel like I was introduced to mysteries at a fairly young age. I think the same as a lot of individuals. I come from a generation of people where when you went to the school library when you were a kid in elementary or junior high school, or the public library, you came across these amazing books by authors like John Green and some of his contemporaries, and you would find these amazing books, sometimes written and then others sometimes written more towards a younger audience, and those written towards an adult audience. And you know, a lot of those books didn't just cover Bigfoot, but they covered other topics too, of the strange and the unusual, ghosts, the paranormal, UFOs, the Loch Ness monster. And I think when you're a kid, those types of stories have a particular type of magic, especially when you've always been told while you're in school that, you know, everything worth finding has largely been discovered. Everything, you know, a lot of the world's mysteries have been resolved, and a lot of this, you know, a lot of this old information, these old stories that used to be chalked up to folklore and myth and legend, may actually have a grain of truth to them that you as an individual may have a chance in your lifetime to explore. So I think that is kind of my first introduction to topics like that too as well. And then after that, you know, you start to grow up and get a little bit older, and because a lot of those topics don't play a central role in your life, especially if you're living in the city or whatever the case too, right? It kind of fades to the outskirts, but it never really goes away. Every now and then something pops up on television, on one of those on a TV series. I remember when Monster Quest, for example, popped back up on the radar, and that was kind of fun to watch for a while. And over a period of time, though, as well, I think the quality of shows like Sightings and stuff like that, they're largely haven't really been replaced in the 21st century, right? Anyways, so that's that childhood introduction piece. The second part for me, where this became more of an ongoing day-to-day piece, and how this became an element of my life, was more to do with back in June of 2017. So back then, I went out on a remote fly fishing trip, right? This was out on Crown land, out in a public land use zone. And me and a friend had gone out in the middle of the week too. So not a lot of campers out there, right? Most people are the weekend warriors. They show up Friday night with their big fifth wheel trailers and try to park into the different spots. But we went further back and we went further in with our four-wheel drives, and we went out a little bit ahead of our friends. We went out and we actually took all of the additional tents and food and stuff like that for everyone else. And we did a job of going as the advance party and setting up everyone's tents and things like that for them before they arrived on the following night. That night, you know, we weren't drinking or anything like that. I should probably clarify, or smoking the devil's lettuce. But we did go to bed fairly early, you know, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, after, you know, making supper around the campfire. Just me and the one friend. And then so he went to sleep in his tent, which was probably like an 8-man tent, a really large one of those kinds where you could blow up 2 queen-size mattresses side by side, a big one like that. And he had a big air mattress right in the middle of the tent. Me, though, I had a single-man shelter, like a little bivvy shelter with kind of like loose material, and just big enough for one person. Basically a sack with a mosquito net. And so we went to bed, and then in the middle of the night, probably between 2:30 and 3:30, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning, I was suddenly awoke by something that was grabbing my head through the loose material that was making up my tent or shelter. And so I because I'm in this single person shelter, you can't stand up. In fact, you can't even sit up. So I bolted up onto my shoulders. And I could feel the hand on my head, and it retreated through the material of the tent. And then it was just kind of a calmness, right? My heart was pounding, and I started sweating. Everything was racing. My mind was racing. But I distinctly remember the hand coming off my head. And so it's just quiet. All you hear are the tree, like a little bit of the trees rustling, a little bit of the leaves, and then that's about it. Nothing walking around, nothing sniffing, nothing poking, nothing prodding. And then after about, I don't know, 7 or 8 seconds, my memory kind of fails me on how long it was, just enough to be really afraid. The hand came back through the material of the tent, and it grabbed me again with a grip on the top of my head. And so after that, it started palpating around. So it started feeling like this, and the wrist was articulating like this. And so people have always asked me, like, well, do you think it was a bear? And I said, no, I've had bears come through before, and usually there's a really aggressive sniffing, right? It's trying to sniff around and see what's going on. And also as well, what grabbed my head, especially the second time, articulated its wrist like this and like this. What it reminded me of is if you've ever put your hand into a backpack and you were searching around trying to find something by feel, that's kind of what it reminded me of. Something was trying to figure out what I was by feeling through the material of my tent or my bivy shelter. And the size of the hand too, I think, is important. When I was thinking about this too, I think when I first started, mentioning this story, I used to use an example of like a catcher's mitt in baseball. But to me, like the more appropriate way of putting it is it's about the size of the biggest frying pan you have in your house. That is how big the hand was. And so the fingers were actually coming over my head, around over top of my eyes. You could feel it all around. If you ever go on Google image search and you look at a photo of LeBron James's hands gripping a basketball, it looks like a normal person grabbing a grapefruit. And that is the level of wraparound that this had over my head through the material of the tent as it felt around. And mind you as well, during this experience, there are no claws that are piercing through the material of the tent. I could feel the flatness of the fingers, and I could feel as far as I can remember, I could feel the tips of where they ended too. After a period of time, the memory becomes, with the terror and the memory, it begins to get kind of gets mushy after a while. But anyway, so this happened for a period of time too. How long? I don't know, maybe 10, 12, 14 seconds. And then after that, I was in a semi-reclined position, and I jolted forward, and I ripped my head out of the grip of the hand that was coming through my tent. And whatever it was, I could kind of hear it lurch back in the dirt and just go as if it kind of took a step back. And then after that, nothing. So I didn't hear anything move off. I didn't hear anything leave. I didn't hear anything sniff around. And I didn't hear anything go anywhere. And that was the most terrifying part, because as far as I know, whatever it is still standing over top of my tent, lurching down and looking down over me. And then, so I stayed awake for as long as I could. I feel like I probably dipped back out into sleep for a little bit after about an hour, hard to say. And then before I knew it, it was light out. And so I got out of my tent. I had to go to the bathroom really bad. And I was just kind of like looking around after the first light was out. Mind you, this is middle of June, right? So it got light pretty early, even in the mountains. And so I was completely adrenaline shot too. And I was just having a hard time staying awake. And my friend got out of his tent. And the first thing that he says to me before I say anything, he says to me, "What were you doing walking around my tent last night?" And I was like, so he had taken his big tent and he jammed it right into the bush. So on 3 sides of his tent, he had knee-high scrub, waist-high brush and debris and bushes and stuff like that. So you couldn't walk around his tent without making that swish, swish, swish like you would by going through the bushes. I should also back up and mention one other point. So around the time the hand grabbed me and it had a grip on my head through the tent, and immediately afterwards, I should also mention the reason I know that this wasn't my friend playing a joke on me is because he has sleep apnea, and so I could hear him snoring, 20 feet away, right? So I could hear the snoring the whole time, and so that's how I know it wasn't him. And we were the only ones out there too. So go back to where I was before. My friend mentions like, yeah, there was someone walking in a crescent shape around his tent that night, and maybe it was looking for another head to grab. Anyway, so that was kind of my introduction there, and so we were like, well, yeah, I don't know. I think it makes sense to rule out, an animal being in the campsite. We did look around, and we did make some mistakes too, right? We had some food residue still left over in a cast iron pan. But we took all of the meat and scented items, and we actually put them behind the tailgate of my truck, and we folded the cover of the truck bed over. And so because we had come in on this dirt road and now we were off-roading it, both of our vehicles were covered in really light, fine trail dust. So because all of the food was behind my tailgate, I also thought one of two things. One is something was going to mess with the food residue in the frying pan, and it didn't. And I was going to think that there would be fur rubbings against the tailgate, right? Something trying to stand up and maybe paw at or rub against, or try to find a way through the tailgate to get to the meat in the cooler, right? Nothing, no fur striations, no hair striations along the tailgate, nothing messed with that. We also had 4 $800 fly rods across a 6-foot folding table that we left out at night, including, $100 fishing vests and flies and hooks and reels and equipment, not to mention a cooler full of alcohol over underneath a tree. Nothing was touched. So the robber hypothesis, or the nighttime visitor hypothesis, wasn't really there either. And then when I woke up too, and I was looking around, of course I didn't say anything to him about the hand, but I was also thinking, like, did someone else pull in at night? Were people trying to play a prank on me? Nothing like that. No other campers within kilometers of us in the middle of the week, right? So that was my second introduction to something my first introduction to something that could be a personal experience. And so I'll take that a little bit further. I was trying to go. I didn't tell my friend too much else about my personal experience. I didn't want to scare the crap out of him. I wanted us to be able to stick around for the weekend and be able to fish. But I thought about it the whole weekend, and it just kept me from being really comfortable. So when I got home, I had an opportunity, though. I had a chance to go and do some research online, try to figure out whether or not other people have had a similar experience. A couple of months later, I kind of came to relatively quickly, I came to the conclusion that it is possible that a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, is what came through my campsite and grabbed my head that night. And so I was actually looking for a way to disprove this. I wanted to find a group of people that would show me that this is nothing to worry about, or the type of people that believe in Sasquatch are a little bit too loony to be trusted. So what I decided to do to disprove it to myself is I was Googling around, and by chance it was 2017, right? This is the 50-year anniversary of the PGF. So in September of that year, there was a Bigfoot conference, the Big Sky Bigfoot Conference, which no longer runs, in Hamilton, Montana. And so they had all of the regular guest speakers, Jeff Meldrum and a bunch of folks, right? And so I went down there in September, and I was telling myself, like, look, I'm gonna show up here. Everyone is gonna be an eccentric, and that will help me write off this experience. Because if only weirdos believe in this, then I get a free pass, and I can go back into the woods. So I show up at this conference. And on the Friday night, they run a BFRO style open town hall, like you would see in the show Finding Bigfoot, right? Where they call out the BFRO guys, go stand at the front, and they start calling out, picking hands in the audience, and then people share their stories and their experiences. They ask a couple of back and forth questions, and then ask people if they'd be interested in showing them on a map where their thing was. Anyways, so I showed up 2 hours late to this thing, and I quietly walk in and I sit down at the back. And I kid you not, the very next person who is called upon, once I sit down, is this this a bit of an older gentleman, probably in his early 50s, from Idaho. And he describes Well, yes, I was camping in one of the state forests in northern Idaho, and I was sleeping at night, and yeah, in the middle of the night, something came and it grabbed my head through the material of my tent, and it was patting my head like this, and I shot up, jumped out of my tent, shined the mag light, and I pointed my 357 in its face. And what was it? It was a Sasquatch, and it made a oh face, and it turned around and it ran to the bush. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. I've driven 8 hours to Montana and the very first person that I hear speak had the exact same thing happen to him. The only difference was he was brave enough to hop out of his tent and point a gun at it. So, so that was my first few months in the world, being introduced to the world of Bigfoot and Sasquatch. And then I spent the rest of the weekend there just talking to other witnesses about their experience and getting a good feel for how this is a regular occurrence for just normal people like me. And so that is how I got introduced to that. And then there's a bit of a separate story on how things got kind of all manifested as Alberta Sasquatch and the team that we have today. So.
Oh my gosh, that is like
a journey into it.
Amazing and scary story. I don't know how you could just let something woohoo touch your head without letting out a scream or I don't know. I think I would have not kept my cool.
Sure. Well, I've heard of stories like that, and it's like that's actually why I don't put my head near the side of a tent. Is a previous story that I've heard like that, and it's terrifying because it's like you don't know what it is, and that's that tent wall is very, very thin, so it doesn't give you that much protection.
It gives you a sense of protection even though you feel like, oh, I'm protected, I'm in my tent, but it's really not that much.
And the structure that I was sleeping into, it didn't have a lot of normally they have like those big bendy boughs and stuff, and the thing that I was sleeping in didn't have a lot of that, so it's all just really loose material, right? It's basically just a bag with a hoop over my head, right? And so there is no tension either. So the reason I think my friend didn't get bothered is because he was sleeping in the middle of a queen size air mattress in the size of a tent that's big enough to fit two of them, and so he was just snoring away. And so whatever it was left him alone, even though it sounds like it went past there a couple of times too as well. So so that was it.
Oh my gosh, well, that's a pretty amazing first encounter. And to say the least. And we have heard that before, of people having something scrape their hands down the side of
or pushing down the tent or something.
It's like the hand, stuff like that. And I do agree that if it was a bear, that would not have been normal bear how they act, because they do a lot of swiping, but they don't do any. They're it's all together kind of deal, I could see them batting the heck out of you.
I think you'd probably feel the claws at some point. Rubbing your head, touching your head like that. And
so no damage to the material of the tent, no puncture. And the other part that got me too was there was no sniffing. Because I've had black bear come into a camp before, and there was very aggressive sniffing, right? Sniffing and pawing, and then even an adult black bear, which I have seen later in that area, the front paw isn't really that impressive, right? It's not that substantial. This was Shaquille O'Neal grabbing a grapefruit or grabbing a basketball. It's a different, and this is a grip with something that you could feel on three sides of your head, right? Minus the neck, right? Yeah. And then there's the articulation of the wrist too. That also got me. The articulation of the wrist, the feeling around. I don't know. So
that is, and like Killed by Bigfoot says, bears are noisy, animals are noisy. They're, like you said, sniffers, skunks, raccoons. You can hear their little noses going 100 miles an hour when they're around, looking for that food. So
one question, Keenan. Sorry, my computer dropped the signal and it takes forever to reboot back up again.
We got you.
Yeah. I missed the almost the whole story, but you told me this when we met 2 years ago, and I asked you then. I'm going to ask you again now. What you definitely feel that your partner out there did not slip out of his tent and try to scare you?
That's correct. Yeah, so I mentioned to the crew here, and you may have missed this part too, is that the friend I went fishing with has sleep apnea, and he sleeps, and so when he doesn't have the mask because he doesn't have a power source when we're in the woods, he snores to the point where you would if you were in the same tent, you would be vibrating, right? And so while this I can't say while the hand was on my head that I could hear the snoring because I was too terrified. But immediately following it, and through the entire effort to try to stay awake until the sun came up, holding still, keeping as still as possible for my life in this tent, I could hear him snoring the whole time. So it wasn't him immediately there and then hopping back into the sleeping bed, because that's you can't fake that sleep apnea.
And were there any other people camping anywhere in the general vicinity at all?
No, so this was middle of the week, and this is also before the opening of fly fishing season. So there's not a lot of fishermen there yet, right? So to be a little bit more clear, this was on a Thursday, and fly fishing season either opened on the Friday or the Saturday. So you always June 16th or June 19th in Alberta, right? It's a fixed date, and so nobody was there yet. And because it's the middle of the week, he didn't get the weekend warriors. And so when we woke up in the morning, I was looking around, and we had no one else anywhere near us. So we'd actually gone off the dirt road highway as well and gone down a little bit of a trail. And so the area that we were in as well, it's not a place that it's not as accessible because you can't take like a fifth wheel camper, and nor could you get in there with like a Honda Civic, right?
Wow. So Mr. Lee says, did you look for greasy handprints on the tent? But this was way before you even did any kind of squatching, correct? You were just fly fishing.
Yeah, exactly. So we weren't. No, I didn't look for anything on the tent. But what I did look for was whether or not nails had punctured the tent, right? So I did look over it, and so nothing did stick out though. But no, that is a good question, because later on I did meet a woman named Candy who lives out in Manitoba, and during her camping experience here in Alberta, they did have that white residue left on the windows of their vehicles.
No, gosh, we lost Thomas again.
I'm curious, what were you doing that day prior to your encounter that evening? Did you guys do anything? Were you guys just normal campers or just doing that whole thing?
So technically, we couldn't even legally fly fish that day, even though we were camped fairly close to a creek, because the regulation states that it opened the next day at first light. So we went out and we took all of the other tents for our friends. So we set up the tents and the cooking arrangements, dug out the fire pit, chopped all the wood. So you can think of us as like the advance party. We were just there. Just a little bit ahead of everyone else to get everything set up to kind of facilitate things. But even then, we only left Calgary at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's give us a 2-hour drive to the camping area. 6 p.m. You're just setting stuff up, cooking supper, going to bed. That's it. So not a lot of activity. And we as far as like the adventure part too, like, we didn't go and we didn't like hike or do anything. We also didn't do anything from like noise making either. Nothing extraordinary to draw attention. And we had a very humble setup too, right? No trailers or ATVs or anything really loud, or no generators or anything like that too. Just a couple of guys tenting out of their truck.
Do you think that the chopping of the wood might have attracted them, or?
That's possible, but this is also this is still a reasonably popular camping spot, even though it's quite remote. I would say that most weekends there would be somebody camping right where we were camping, even if it is a little bit further off the beaten path. It's because it's free camping, it's very attractive, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, not sure if I answered your question, but what I was kind of getting at was that I think they would be used to the chopping of the wood. So I don't think that would be special, because it is a well-used campsite. So I don't think you could be, I don't think that would be mistaken for like the rhythm of a knock.
Right. So, tell us a little bit how you got involved with Justin Turnipinski from Mountain Beast Mysteries.
Oh yeah, the mountain beast himself. All right. Oh, so yeah. So at the end of 2017, probably by around Christmas. So the timeline there is June is the encounter. September is my first bit conference, and then by November, December, the creative thoughts and processes started going right. I'm like,
Right.
Is there a way to be involved in this? Is that the right thing to do? What would I like to do? How could I contribute? And how would we do this right? And so around then, I got in touch with a guy named Rob McNeil, who was running a kind of an amateur website at the time called Alberta Sasquatch. And I said, hey, let's partner up. I have a background in commercial web design. I can redo this whole thing and make it pretty spiffy, get us to the top of Google search results. And I think we could see if we can get some more reports rolling in. And from there, we'll kind of figure it out. And so just around that time that I had linked up and partnered with Rob on the Alberta Sasquatch project, he had just done an interview with Justin, who was beginning to get some momentum with his Mountain Beast Mysteries YouTube channel. And so we reached out to Justin and said, hey, you know what? We're looking at, kind of rebooting this project and to try to get it going again. And I think this would be a particularly important source of information and collaboration to kind of bring together a few like-minded people who are also able-bodied and able to get out to the woods and do all this stuff. And I think we'd make a good team. So he said, thumbs up, let's do it. And then we had our first kind of get together meeting in 2018 and kind of hashed out some of the details and started going out together.
Wow. Well, I have to say that Mountain Beast Mysteries has one of the best documentaries, cinematography I've ever seen. He makes you want to go along for the ride for sure. The way he presents his journey is amazing. And if anybody out there who has not gone to check out Mountain Beast Mysteries, I highly, highly recommend going and doing that. He's got several documentaries out right now. The one that Keenan was involved in, well, you also have your whole encounter story on his site too. But you also were in his expedition number 4. And I do have some clips from there that I am going to be sharing. So a couple of little clippies. Okay. Oops. Okay, as soon as that comes up. Here we go. So here's a short clip. Just let me see. This one runs a couple minutes from the beginning of the Bigfoot documentary expedition, Sasquatch number 4 from Justin Turnipinski.
I was lucky, however, to have my friend and fellow Bigfoot researcher Keenan on board for this trip.
Oh, there you are.
Only knowledgeable.
It's a big backpack
of Bigfoot and is familiar with the vast majority of reports and sightings.
That's like a young Thomas.
As usual, when we get together, it doesn't take long to begin theorizing about the creature.
So one of the things that Ken had commented on too, right, was this idea that they make mistakes when they're around their children or when their children mess up, right? Their children are seen by humans. But for me, the one thing that I've been convinced of from anecdotal evidence over the last couple of years was more along the lines of they seem to have this proclivity to they get distracted when they're doing something particularly engaging. So you think of a person who gets really into puzzles or who's really into a video game. They become blind to everything that's happening around them. They get tunnel vision on that thing. There are all of these stories of Sasquatch cracking open clams or oysters, or they're fiddling around with rocks, or they're banging a stick against a tree to like a rhythmic pattern, and people walk up on it. And even as they're approaching, 15 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters, making noise as they walk up to them, they don't actually hear them because they're too busy, they're too engaged and enthralled in what they're doing. And actually, that's something that Chris Noel goes into as well with his Sasquatch savant theory, is this idea of almost an autistic-like fascination and engagement, and where they're all in, they're completely enthralled in what they're doing.
So that's the first clip. We'll talk about that just for a sec. So
it makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Said that. Yeah.
It does make a lot of sense in that. I don't think we all agree with everything Christopher Noel says or does. But there are points, that really do make sense. And there he is. Okay, there's Thomas. Oh, he went way teeny weeny down at the bottom.
I don't know what's happening. It's dropped twice, so I tried coming back on with Chrome this time rather than.
Oh, that's
okay. Okay.
Government intervention. Dang it.
Well, I'm showing a few clips from where Keenan was involved in Expedition Sasquatch 4 from Justin Chernopinski's documentary.
And where was this location at here? Was this up in Alberta area? I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me and Justin, we were probably at that point about 14 kilometers down the trail. 10 to 14 kilometers down the trail on the way towards a spot called Landslide Lake. But our goal wasn't to make it to Landslide Lake. It was to make it to a number of these other smaller hidden lakes and creeks and areas of interest along that area. So we were north of the David Thompson, northwest of Abraham Lake. You could tell from from the footage here, it looks like too. You could see it's kind of smoky in the background too. There was certainly the threat of wildfire that whole time. And the good news about Bigfoot Sasquatch is that there's a lot to talk about. So if you're on a long hiking trip, there's a lot to talk about. So,
yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Well, I have another little clip, and this one, the question for this next little clip I'm going to show is what it's like for you to hike in such a vast, beautiful wilderness. I mean, this next clip is going to show some of that, and it's really, really, I mean, man, you have to do some conditioning, I think, before you go out and do this kind of hikes. But here's the next clip.
So you had like a little opening.
Look at that.
Where there's been a mudslide or a landslide in the past.
Well, when I camped here, that's what I kept looking up there because I heard the rock clack, and so the whole evening I was watching this ridge. Yeah, it's creepy coming back here alone.
Yeah,
like your mind starts playing tricks on you. And when I came out here on that trip, it was real early in the season. There's nobody else out here.
So I hope you guys all got a good view of that scenery. I mean, that you guys, it seemed like you were way out there.
Yeah, we were way out there, and we had some pretty big packs too, as well. Also, keep in mind, in addition to all of the items you need to survive, we're also assisting Justin with carrying an entire crew.
Oh, his gear,
with camera equipment as well, just in case something happens too, right? To be prepared for that. But yes, one of the things about the area that we were in on that particular trip as well is, though there is a path at the beginning, most individuals turn around after about 6 or 7 kilometers. That's about as far as the average hiker goes. A few other individuals, they will actually, if they have the money, they'll charter a helicopter and they'll fly all the way out there. And so after the 7 kilometer mark, you tend to see people drop off, and you don't see anyone until you get 14, 15, 17 kilometers in, because they're flying in and flying out with all of their kits. So we were the few brave souls that decided to put 75 pounds of gear or whatever on our backs and to hike out there. So you can get a very good feel for that too, because you could see the well-worn trail turns into the not so worn trail that turns into well, there used to be a trail here, but we got a GPS and we'll figure it out.
Well, I do have that clip too, and this one I was like really feeling for you.
Anyways,
buddy.
We pushed on hard to try and get to the camp by a decent hour. The smoke in the air from all the nearby wildfires didn't make it any easier for us.
Look at
But
that.
eventually we
Holy
made it
cow.
to where we wanted to go.
Yeah.
I'm dying. He's dying. He's dying. Oh
Ooh,
my goodness.
look at that.
Yeah, look at that. It's just, and yeah, you can see the smoke from the fire she was talking about on this one, but
Oh, yeah, that was a brutal year. That was a
it's-
brutal year for fires, for sure.
it's just amazing. I mean, wow.
Yeah,
don't
that
know
was a
what to
pretty
say.
special spot to make it to. And the cool part too is once you make it to this little tiny hidden spot as well, everything really begins to cool off as well. So I think for us, this was about 14 or 15 kilometers in to reach that first lake. And the good news though is I did remember to bring a 6-pack of beer, so that was completely worth it in the end. So
It was a little treat, your little prize at the end.
Absolutely.
So everybody, if you have questions for Keenan, please make sure that you put those questions in caps so I can find them. Because yeah, the chat's going and then I know I'm missing a lot of questions out there. So please make sure you put them in caps for me so I can find them easier.
Can I ask you a question before I drop off again?
Go for it.
Back when I was there, the most common areas it seemed for reports was in the general Nordegg, Abraham Lake area, and the Sundre to the Clearwater River area seemed to be the most popular or the most common areas with encounters of alleged Sasquatch sightings. You still find this the case, Keenan, or has that changed?
no, that's still largely true. We actually get encounters out of that Sundre area in the southwest area immediately adjacent to it every year, as well as out of the area west of Nordegg. Typically, I don't think we've received an authentic report between Rocky Mountain House and Nordegg. It's always been a little bit further west. But we also did a Sasquatch symposium alongside Jeff Meldrum in Grand Prairie in 2019, and that really brought out the reports from the Grand Prairie to Trout Lake area. We've also received a number of reports from wildland firefighters from Edmonton to, or not from Edmonton specifically, but through the road to Fort McMurray through Edmonton, Lac La Biche. One of the interesting things is one of the places that we actually get the fewest reports from actually is the actual the national parks, Jasper and Banff. But we do get quite a few out of Peter Lougheed Provincial Park in Kananaskis as well. And then the other place that's really died down since probably your time in Alberta has been Waterton Lakes National Park. I've had a chance to speak to some of the former witnesses from the 1990s, including one of the Cameron Lake witnesses. That place in particular has been quite ravaged by wildfires over the last decade or so too. And anything maybe of that size and the requirements that it has probably has moved out of that spot though. But yes, generally speaking, there's a tremendous amount of consistency to it. I try to be quite cognizant of the fact that you also have to have those two factors in order to have a sighting too, right? You have to have the creatures, but you also have to have people. And you have not just that, but you have to have the type of people who are willing to come forward and do a Google search and find this eclectic group of people on the internet and be willing to say, stick their hand up and also say, yep, I've had something happen to me as well. So yeah, we've certainly done pretty well for encounters in the Nordegg area as well as in that Sundre area, definitely.
Okay, excellent.
Are these areas you've been to, Thomas?
All of them.
All of them?
Yeah. I spent a lot of years in Alberta. I started off in Alberta in 1978. I didn't leave Alberta until September 2002.
Oh, okay.
And I'm very happy Keenan and others have carried on, because when I started, myself and the late Vladimir Markotic seemed to be the only ones in Alberta that was looking into anything.
Yeah.
But now Keenan and other groups taken up the cause, and they're doing a tremendous job.
Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing too I'd like to mention is that even though we're out there and we're kind of a public face and researching as well, one of the parts that I found pretty interesting were the number of people that do it. I don't want to say surreptitiously, but they do it below the radar. I've met groups of I've met teams of individuals in their 40s or their 50s where there are 5 to 10 members of a group, and they've been out and beating the bush for 10 to 15 years looking for answers as well. And I've come across a couple of different groups here in Alberta too as well that they don't need sighting reports. They don't need to hear encounters. They just go out and they do their own thing. And I've met a couple of groups like that too. So it's good to know that those individuals are out there because we've networked with them, and through mutual credibility and honesty and openness, we've actually been able to share notes and be very open about the experiences and the progress that we each make too. So that has been a tremendous benefit to our work as well and to our body of knowledge. The individuals who don't want any credit, who don't want to be on a podcast, and certainly aren't adding it into their LinkedIn profile. So,
right.
How did your camp out go this year?
The camp out? Yeah, so that went really well. So I deliberately made it a little bit smaller than last year, just because last year we had 37 attendees, and I found that really hard to get to know everyone in a weekend. So we dialed it back down to 27 from 37. And it was a more intimate experience. We used the same campground as last year and had the same success. But I felt like the result at the end of the weekend is a group of people that were much closer than last time. And so it worked out great. We've been running these public camping trips, by the way, Nikki, every July or August, roughly since 2018 when we first met Leon. And we found it to be a particularly potent way to bring out local witnesses who are interested in sharing their stories. We always run these public camping trips in a paid campground, and we just charge the amount of money necessary to pay off the camping fee. Right. And to provide firewood. And we typically invite about 15 to 20 vehicle loads worth of people out to have a weekend. And we engage with witnesses who are interested in speaking to someone first before they open up and share their story. We do some hiking, go down to Abraham Lake and hang out on the shore of the water, tell stories and even share potluck food and stuff like that too. It's a really good experience. And the other thing we found is that not a lot of people were interested in doing something like that. Everyone wants to either have a conference or nothing, right? They got a big Bigfoot conference, but this was a more intimate experience. And we just found that the information sharing, the storytelling, and the fellowship and the community of it was what was really important. Because there are lots of people out there who either have a belief in Sasquatch, had a childhood encounter, had a recent encounter, and they've had nobody to tell this to their whole lives. And so you could come hang out for a weekend, eat some hot dogs, go on a couple hikes, dip your feet in the lake, and even bring your fishing rod, and then share some campfire stories and be part of a community in a way that you've never really been able to engage around content and ideas like that. So that was what the most important part of that is. It's not necessarily about going out and looking and having a research-centric trip. It's about community.
Right. And I experienced that firsthand because last month I myself went on, to the Mogollon Rim with some friends, and we got together as a fellowship. It was to meet other people that we had been talking online forever, all with like-minded, all, behind the scenes type of Bigfoot researchers, armchair researchers. Some of them are Bigfoot researchers, and we're doing the search boots on the ground, but it was a way for us to all meet and get together. And that's what was our main intention, was just to sit around the fire and do that friendship and tell stories and just appreciate each individual. So yeah, it's a great thing. And because I did notice, and I was going to bring up your public camping trips, but I also noticed that looks like you have a woman's retreat in the mountains as well.
Nope.
No,
I don't think we've done that before.
It's a good idea, though.
Yeah.
Well, it's under your thing, so you better have one now. So, no.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, it does, but there must have been from something else attached at the bottom. Oh, okay, I see. I missed the little thing that said events you might like.
Oh, interesting.
Because I'm like, ooh, I'd save money, but that's a lot of money. That one was a lot of money.
Keenan, I was going to ask you a question as well. How do you deal with the bush willies?
What's that?
How do you deal with the bush willies? I was going to talk to Justin about this too. I thought it'd be interesting for people to do a video with Justin and maybe Nick from Roscoe's Bushcraft about, because a lot of you guys go out there by yourselves, right, into the bush. How do you deal with your bush willies?
Oh, I don't deal with it well at all. I've gotten used to staying awake at night so that I could sleep underneath a tree during the day. You could ask Justin about that last experience that we had out towards Landslide Lake as well, too, where I largely stay awake till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's just so quiet and so clear that every tree snap or whatever, you get the night vision. Right, and it's difficult or impossible to get completely comfortable. So that's the other part of it too. That's the other part of like going out and looking, is that there has to be eventually some degree of personal safety and security in order to be able to be out there for an extended period of time. So to go out for 4 or 5 days on a backpacking trip with as much food as you can carry, 14 kilometers from a road that was still another 2-hour drive from an ambulance, from a hospital. You don't feel like you don't have the modern world safety nets right there behind you, right? So one of the things that we've talked about too is sustainability and the ability to operate out of some of these areas with year-round activity and reports that come to us or our own personal experiences, but the ability to drive into these remote areas, to have access and to be able to sleep in your vehicle or bring a trailer or something like that, something not so remote and so rugged that you can't get in there and have a degree of comfort, with 4 walls or something like that around you too. We're going to try to be having more of those experiences so that people can settle into a routine and not be completely bagged when we get to the place that we're going to. Because I think the one thing that I have to give these the Sasquatch a credit for too is their ability to exist and thrive on the edge of human civilization. There's this I don't want to say an illusion, because there is a requirement for this sometimes, but there is also, you don't necessarily have to go 8 hours from home into the deepest, darkest woods that you can find. Sometimes you only need to go an hour and a half into the eastern slope of the Rockies, and a lot of those places are quite accessible. You could take a vehicle, you could take a tent or a trailer, and you can just go a little bit further, venture a little bit further out from the beaten path from your little comfortable home base, and to have personal experiences and encounters there. So,
do you have a locator beacon that you prefer to take with you?
Yeah, I use a Garmin InReach. It's particularly useful. It's not super expensive, and you just pay for the months you need, and then it has SOS, and I do a daily check-in as well. But the other part of it that's cool about Garmin InReach is that it has a website, so you can send the personalized website link to the rest of the team back it's in civilization, and you do regular check-ins with them. So if you're so not only does it drop a pin on a map and it shows them on a 3D relief where you are, but you also have the ability to send messages back and forth to do check-ins as well. It provides a bit of a reach back capability, right? I like to think that if I were to find some sort of compelling evidence, that I wouldn't be willing to leave it and to go get casting material or whatever. I'd want to stay that and be able to call support to us. So we've already arranged that too as well, usually for our outings.
Wow. That's
do you need any type of equipment that if you could use some equipment, what equipment could you handle or use?
What would I like? What would I like again?
Yes. What would you like for Christmas in regard to something in the book? I asked Justin this the other night there, so he said he seems to have everything he needs. I guess I don't know, which is surprising.
Yeah. For me in particular, what I think would be, I'm more fascinated with the audio now than I am around some of the visual pieces, and so we have a network of friends here who've had good success with just 10 to 12-inch sized parabolic microphones setups, sometimes homemade, other times professionally acquired. They're not very difficult to make. And they can be set up at a distance from your vehicle or from a hide or from a blind, and you can listen and you can hear for kilometers. One of our groups, or one of our friends as well, they actually have a little motor on a tripod, so they can articulate it, and then they'll just kind of camp out in the back of their Jeep and they'll listen. So for me, the audio piece has been particularly interesting, right? Over the years that we tend to get more audio information, or we get footprints and we get audio, but we don't get a lot of photos. So for me, I'm kind of going more towards the audio piece here. I think as well, one of the other opportunities that we have ramping up for in 2023 is to have one of the more sophisticated audio blasting setups. So typically when people do audio clip blasting, they do it in a very unsophisticated way. They use kind of cheaper speakers or computer speakers or Bluetooth speakers. What we have lined up for next summer are what some people would refer to as a concert quality array of speakers, but that's only half of it too. You have to come up with an audio program that has continuity and it's sophisticated enough that it has sort of a natural rhythm and flow to it. And so we have enough individuals with audio technician experience to be able to create these artificial programs that are multi-hour tracks that we can play and do that from an elevated position. We've already sourced out how to do this silently as well, so we're not running generators, and to be able to do that and to listen, call and listen, not just playing little clips or animal noises off YouTube or blasting the Sierra sounds with all the feedback and noise and junk. We actually have the ability to do this in a sophisticated call and listen in high potential areas. So I think that's something that you'll see from us next summer as well.
Keenan, that's interesting, but you get a call back. What do you got? You got a noise in the woods.
Yeah.
You don't say what did it. There could be other explanations for it.
What it reminds me of is, so when I first got into hunting, the first game the first prey that I ever went to go hunt for were coyotes. And I bought a DVD on Amazon to kind of get a baseline of information on how to hunt coyotes. And what these guys did, whenever they were looking for coyotes, they would go out to a hill somewhere and they would have a bullhorn. And the bullhorn thing would have a siren sound on it. It would just go ring, and they would just hold it down for about 10 seconds and then they would let off. And then the coyotes, wherever they were, would call back to the wailing sound of the bullhorn. The bullhorn doesn't sound anything like an animal, but for whatever reason, it initiates a response. It allows you to pick a wayfind a direction and to approximate a distance. So what we're looking for here isn't necessarily the ability to be the next group that has an Ohio howl and call it a Bigfoot without the visual confirmation. It's more of a prospecting tool to be able to identify whether or not an area, a direction, and a distance has higher potential at a certain time of the year. So does it have the ability to be definitive? No, I don't think so. But I think it serves a purpose in advancing the knowledge or the prospect of something of interest being in a particular area. And best case scenario, actually one of the jokes I've always made is that the best case and worst case scenario is both running into a Bigfoot and then having one crack you over his knee like a twig. But you get your visual sighting, but then you got back problems for the rest of your life. Joking aside, though, it's for me, it's more the other possibility too is that if you are interesting enough, I think you might be able to bring something to you as well. I think you could shorten that, you can compress that timeline of how long it takes to bring something to you. So and the reason why I say that too is one of our experiences has largely been that when we go out and we try to be very deliberate in some ways about trying to bring activity to you, banging sticks, leaving bait stations, doing whatever, doing all of these things, or having incursions into their territory with the effort of trying to allow them to follow you back. What all of this stuff, it's never, it's largely, it hasn't helped. All of our best experiences have been the times where we actually remained in camp, played music, had fun, laughed, had drinks, smoked some cigarettes, and all of that stuff too. Those were the times where activity kind of came to us. So part of this too is I guess it's kind of like a hybridized effort there, where we are still trying to be deliberate and interesting, and we can experiment with different audio programs. But the idea is to remain in a fixed position and to be able to listen and prospect.
Wow. What, with all that, what are your feelings with evidence? What holds your highest mark? Say footprints. Do you believe in structures, glyphs? People hold all these things to pretty high standards. Like, I don't hold glyphs. I don't hold structures. I don't think that those play a part, but some do. What is your feelings on that?
Yeah. So what this kind of reminds me of is a quote from a couple of the gentlemen with the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, and I had a chance to talk to one of them the other day as well. We had an email exchange back and forth, and one of the things that he was saying too is just like, we don't cast footprints anymore. We don't do that anymore. We don't catalog the rocks that are thrown at us. We've had that happen for years now, right? So what this kind of reminds me of is that too. It's just like, if we found an impressive footprint, we would cast it and stuff like that too. But this isn't about trying to. But some of that stuff though, it doesn't advance it any further, right? It doesn't. It's not, in a way, it's not really doing that much to advance the credibility in the eyes of some of the strongest critics, right? It's not another casted footprint, another photograph of an alleged tree structure, or even finding a dead deer in the woods that's been ripped in half and thrown in a tree or whatever. None of those things they're not really essential anymore. We have enough of those things. I understand that casting footprints over a period of time may help you identify differentiate individuals within the species and a bunch of other stuff for like metering a population, but that's not really what's important to me. When we survey our team members as well, what we're looking for next is to see whether or not it's possible to initiate another personal experience, personal encounter at close range. Either through enticing it to happen or through just sort of passively waiting for something like that. So yeah, a lot of these things certainly serve as evidence, and I don't want to downplay their significance of identifying whether or not a group is in an area, but it's just not the most important thing right now. And I'm not sure if I really believe in glyphs and stuff like that too. They probably do use stuff like that though, right? I've watched a documentary on a previously uncontacted tribe in South America, and what they would do is that they would use 2 sticks and a few blades of grass, and between these 2 sticks and 3 blades of grass, and how they configured them and laid this on a path, it could communicate over 150 different messages, right? So 150 different meanings could be gleaned from 3 blades of grass, where they were tied along the length of a stick, and how it was adjusted in relation to another stick. And so the hunters within the group would leave these at intersections or at important areas to be able to indicate to the person who comes after them, I've gone home, I've got game, I'm empty-handed, I've brought water, the village is this way, medicine is in that direction, and they could communicate all of these different things with just those 5 items. So do they have the intelligence to do something like that? Perhaps, or perhaps it's also just kind of random and we're just looking for stuff. So is it possible that they do use something like that amongst themselves? Perhaps. Are we sophisticated or tuned in enough to be able to decipher that and say, this thing here that I've stumbled across is definitely a contribution from them to themselves, right? It's a way marker. It's a direction towards food. It's the direction towards water. Or I came through here. I don't think we have the ability to decipher that. So that's my long-winded way of saying, I think for me at least, we're past the point where we're trying to document and collect all of that. We're looking for the next piece, which is that visual confirmation. And then from there, I think we can make some better decisions about, how we would try to capture something like that on video evidence or whatever the case. I'm not particularly concerned or obsessed with the idea of proof itself. For me, I am looking for that next personal experience. And much like a lot of people out there too, I wouldn't mind seeing one passing, just in passing from the window of my car, rather than having one kick over my tent in the middle of the night. So,
right. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Thomas. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask. You're not so interested in proof. You say about a year ago when I met you at the get together near Nordegg. Wonderful time, by the way. Enjoyed it immensely. There was a lot of talk about a recent hair sample finding. I believe fellow Alberta researcher Cameron Young brought it to everyone's attention. Mm-hmm. And it was being sent off to be examined. Was there any follow-up on that or any conclusion?
Yeah, so Doug Hychek, who's in touch with Justin because they're partners on this future Legend Meets Science Part 2 project. There's two main efforts there. The main effort that they're planning is around DNA evidence. There's the part that everyone is aware of too, the white residue that's left by their fingers, and then the second part is around hair evidence. So the hair that was provided to us is from a young gentleman at that Bighorn reservation just outside of Nordegg, and he had come across hair that was attached. So there were a few things that would indicate that there was activity in the area, and he came across some hair that was not recognizable to him as any of the species that he would normally track and hunt. So he bagged that up and he provided us with a sample of it. So that sample is in Justin's possession, and it will eventually be transferred to the United States when they are secure enough in that position to be able to proceed with that. It appears to be a high potential sample. We just don't know much more than that. So I think the part that we would also benefit from would also be a microscopic analysis before it's processed and identified as high potential for non-human. Yeah, as non-human, right? Non-human, non-ungulate, whatever. So that is still within our possession, and it is properly and appropriately stored, and we're just waiting for the resources to be able to process something like that.
Roger that. All right.
Yeah, that's good. That's kind of like what I've always said is that everything you do when you're out there, boots on the ground, your collection, your whatever you're doing, that's all great. It's all for you to keep, and hold on to. You hold on to if you think this glyph is Bigfoot related, take the picture, hold it. I don't particularly think that you need to share it to the world, but at some point, if this, hairy man in the woods comes to reality where we have a body somehow, all that is going to become important. Then the prints are going to be really important. Then maybe the structures are going to be important. All of that, just maybe not right now, because we do know all that stuff, and we all are, speculating a lot about that stuff out in the woods. Mm-hmm. But that's just my feelings that, everybody has their own way of researching, and that's also another key to this is I think everybody has something to bring to the table. Everybody's a little bit different, and at some point somebody's going to get lucky. I think it is a little bit lucky. You know,
Bill, are you wanting to say anything too? You're pretty quiet. You want to bring them to the table? You haven't said anything all show yet.
The only thing I would say to Nikki's point there is when you don't, and she's right that it's your evidence, do what you want with. But if you don't share it publicly, then you've added nothing to the collective knowledge. And a good way to look at it is, you know, they say that Leonardo da Vinci made a design for a blast furnace, didn't share it, and it took 400 years for Europe to reinvent it.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, it's yours to do what you want. But again, you know, somebody has a Sasquatch body sitting in their freezer in their basement, they haven't shared it with the world, saying, "Oh, look, I know something nobody else does."
Right.
Well, it's meaningless. It's the same as if it didn't exist. So I think, you know, the whole point of, you know, you can do it for yourself. I mean, again, that's your prerogative. But in order to advance, you have to share and, you know, just do the scientific method where other people can examine it, you know, repeatability and all that other great stuff that we talk about all the time ad nauseum.
Another question, if I can.
Yes.
Okay. For Keenan is, when I was in Alberta, I noticed, and I'm wondering if this is still the case, or most reports concerning the subject's height was normal, 7-8 feet, normal 7-8 feet, normal 7-8 feet, 9 feet, you know, maybe a little more, a little less, depending on the circumstances. But there was a whole rash of reports between 1948 and 1984 in around Nord, in the general, within 80-kilometer circle of Nordegg, of extremely tall height reports. We're talking like 12, 13, 14. In one case, the Bighorn Dam is at 1969, 15 feet. But I noticed that all the extreme tall height reports seemed to come to a stop in 1984. Or at least I never heard of another one. Whereas normal height reports continued. I was wondering, is that is still the case, Keenan? Are you still getting that, or do extreme height reports still come in every now and then?
No, I don't think I've ever received anything for anything that was too extraordinary.
Yeah.
Most of the better height estimates too are the roadside crossings.
Right.
Usually because a person can approximate based off of either a tree foliage or, if we're lucky, a street sign. In the near vicinity of where that happened. But no, we don't get too many extraordinary claims around height. And in fact, if I would have gotten them, I'd probably raise an eyebrow over it.
Well, I raised a lot of eyebrows over them.
Yeah. Well, you know, speaking of the you know, the Bighorn Dam incident too, one of the parts that we found particularly interesting though was when we started being able to find the next generation of people whose were their parents were the ones that built the dam. One of the parts that actually began to come out, or when we started interviewing these people, were the number of roadside crossings that occurred with the work crews early in the morning and late at night when they were departing and going in communal vehicles. The dirt road that led into the construction site was notorious for roadside crossings with those crews, and those never were reported. And you never hear about that information in conjunction with the group sighting that occurred from that lower area that's accessible to the public too. So that was another interesting part that was part of our kind of follow-up into that too. So that was kind of cool to have individuals reach out whose parents were workers on that project and say, and this is what my father told me. And also my uncle worked on that project. He confirmed my dad told me independently on a different visit that I'd had with that person. So it just goes to show how much of that stuff is kind of under wraps too. And then kind of speaking of, you know, what Bill said too about like, you know, you could have something in your freezer, but if you're not willing to come forward with it, you're not really helping the situation. I think one of the things that you're also going to see, or that we hopefully will see in our lifetime too, is so if this all does come out in a very conclusive way, and then the social taboo begins to break down around it, I think one of the things you're going to see is you're going to see photographs, 35 millimeter, 45 millimeter, even one of those Instamatic cameras. You're going to see more and more photos that are in people's families, that have been photos that have been passed down and negatives that have been passed down from generation to generation. Say, this is our little secret. we have this perfect photograph or series of photographs or videos. And you're going to see time after time, or when it's okay to talk about it, you're going to see a avalanche of information that comes out, and that is going to be more interesting than that initial body that they put on a slab. Are the multi-generational pieces of evidence, hair, footprints, photographs, stories, when it's okay to talk about it.
Wow. And that's actually a really good lead in to the generations talk we had earlier about Thomas's, when he started, to the new people who are coming in. And I'm going to play a clip in regards to, if I can get over there into that, and then we'll talk about this.
By the way, I think one of the things that we kind of got lucky with is being born into a certain generation of people at a certain stage of the search for this creatures. So I think one of like the curses for like Thomas Steenberg, right, is like, so he was young enough that all of this felt new and exciting when he was getting into it. But there was probably a number of years, even decades, that probably passed by with his search where it felt like the discovery was right around the corner. The next report, the next trackway, the next whatever, it always felt like they were getting better, or they were getting closer, or they were assembling enough information to paint a clearer picture of how to find one. And then it just never happened. And then those original guys started passing away, and it felt less in touch. But like one of the things that Thomas has mentioned in a number of interviews is that it was a big enough of a deal, and it felt real enough, and the evidence seemed legitimate enough to give up everything and just go look for it in the place where he thought he had the best shot of finding it. Get out of the army, go find a job in southwestern BC, look for this thing full time, be closer to Hinden, be closer to Green, be closer. I don't know where Brent lives, probably the US somewhere. And, but yeah, to be closer to those people, collaborate, and figure this all out. And I don't know. Like there's I think I talked to you about this one point too. There was like that South Korean guy that went to look for Siberian tigers. I think it took him 6 years to get his first photograph of one. Knowing where they are, knowing how to bait them, knowing how to find them, knowing all of those things, he had to like go there, and I think by hand he had to like dig out subterranean bunkers. Like he built out like trenches, and then he would put like overhead protection. These are like almost like World War II machine gun trenches, and then he would fully camouflage them, and they would just be just above the ground. So he'd be sitting in these things, not leaving them for weeks at a time, covering his scent, covering his odor, shitting in bags, like to get a photograph of a tiger that we already knew existed, and it was in that area. And like that, and that was all of the work for his unknown creature. So what I think of these trips is that they're all lottery tickets. These are like the scratch-off lottery ticket of looking for Bigfoot.
A house?
Oops.
Or a laptop?
Laptop.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so that came through, right?
Yep.
Okay. Because it doesn't look like it on my thing I'm looking at here.
Well, I think when you're talking about Keenan, it's like the snow leopard there. The guy who did the snow leopard, it took him 4 years. That was over 4. We're not talking 4, like 365 days for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and like you said, you only got glimpses of it, and it's a species that's already out there. I think
for a known species in a known area, guided to it by professional trackers, fully funded, working on it full time, and having having the ability to have an understanding of what it knows, how intelligent it is, what climate and conditions and food, all of those were knowns, right? And it was still a multi-year journey. So I found the name of the Korean dude I was talking about too in that video from last year. It was Soo Young Park. He dedicated his life to filming Siberian tigers, and it's true. When you go through his biography, he talks about like he had to dig bunkers into these areas with just 10 inches or 8 inches of space visible, and just like a little 8-inch window by 24-inch window, just enough to push a video camera out, and he'd have to like hide away in that bunker, pooping in bags and eating not like cold food for weeks to get like 6 minutes of video, in knowing where they were in like a 20 kilometer by 20 kilometer area, right?
But the biggest problem with that analogy, and you hear it all the time, you're talking about one person in a small area, and you're talking about maybe a year in person hours or 6 years in person hours. When you're looking at Sasquatch, you literally have hundreds of person hours every year of people doing the same research. So, and in bigger areas. So, yeah, you can compare what that South Korean did with just yourself in that way, but there are 100, 1,000 guys just like you, just like me, that are investing the same number of person hours. And then when you look at it that way, the amount of time that the South Koreans spent is really not that big of a deal in person hours. And we're also talking at least now like over a 50-year period since the PGF, where you're probably into the tens of thousands, if not at least probably thousands anyways, of person years, maybe tens of thousands of person years. So again, the analogies tend to fade away when you expand upon it.
And for me, it's not like a direct comparison of what I think, like what he did is what would work for this as well, but it's more around the story around commitment, right? It's more around perseverance, consistency, knowledge, experience, learning from mistakes, and then improving, and that the continuous effort. So that's more what I was speaking to.
I would add something to that too, and that is, and you guys heard me say this before, it's possible that all the birds are flying in the wrong direction. And I think that's the problem. The problem is people don't know anything about the bush anymore. People, you got all these people are out there and they're parroting what research is supposed to be. So they're looking for the inappropriate things or things that they shouldn't be looking for time looking for. I don't think we're looking for structures and thinking that structures have something to do with Sasquatch in regards to what we see online on YouTube. It's bushcraft. It's obviously bushcraft. If you don't know anything about the forest and bushcraft, you're going to fill that blank in because you don't know nothing about the bush. If we had the amount of people we have today, but we lived 100 years ago, 120 years ago, where we're used to being in the bush with that bush mentality, the odds are going to be a lot higher that we would have got it on film already. I totally agree with, I think we're dealing with the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is, a lot of people think they know much more about the bush than what they actually do. They don't know nothing about the bush. I mean, I keep chronically saying and repeating is you have to educate yourself on a variety of different fields. When you talk about tracks, you found tracks. If you know how to tell tracks are tracks, you should be able to also find out how to follow them on the ground like you would any other animal. Most people have no idea how to follow tracks. They don't even know how to recognize tracks. I keep getting people sending me tracks saying, well, what do you think? Well, I just had somebody send me something from, what was it, the Yukon the other day. They said, what do you think, Leon? I said, they're moose tracks. Like, it's like, what's his name from Big BFRO? They don't know how to, excavate. So it's not that people are ignorant or immature or stupid or not intelligent. It's just that they're not trained. There's no reason for us to learn how to read the ground anymore. We just go to Safeway to get our food. We don't need to do any of this kind of stuff. I think part of the idea of this mystification that we project onto Sasquatch, that there's some kind of woo experience, is because we have no answers because we're not educated. And so it's better to come up with these ideas like wait, like we talked about before, wait in 50 years, besides the, they're now laying eggs. Sasquatch apparently are laying eggs. Well, we'll show you the nests. I'll show you the nest first, and then, well, show me the egg. I don't want to see the bloody nest. It's supposed to be doing this thing, and using that as a thing in regards to this tree structure. Yeah, I get it that there's everybody out there's thousands of people doing it, but they're all doing it wrong. My
yeah,
thing,
but with that, Leon, that's a cop out in a lot of ways, because not everyone out there is doing it wrong. There are experienced people out there that are doing it. You still have, thousands of trail cams out there. You still there's the point is that there is quality research. Yeah, there's a lot of garbage, but even a broken clock is right twice a day, and
yeah, I agree. If you're looking at education has to do with a sliding scale, and so a sliding scale of information isn't the problem. Is we're not building on valid data. We're building on educational stuff that's parroted, but none of it's confirmed. So you've always heard you hear me say about, let's go back into all the evidence that we supposedly think is Sasquatch. I mean, it amazes me that you guys will agree with this too. I mean, when we ask the question about how many videos out there would you actually say would be done by that you would we say would be Sasquatch, you're really pushing if you're saying 5. That prove that the Sasquatch. Everyone falls back to the Bob Keenan kind of thing. Okay, how about photos? Well, again, you're really pushing to say any, really. And like you said, 52 years. Well, there's a huge gap in regards to education that people don't know what they're looking for. They don't know how to look for it, nor do they know what they're talking about. But they'll certainly come up with a narration that makes it sound like they are. And I think that's probably the problem is we're shooting ourselves in the foot. I'm not talking about, I'm not putting people down saying there's not good people out there that know what they're doing. There's very few people out there that know about tracking and know what the hell they're doing.
Oh, I'd agree. I would.
And the idea is to build on those people who do know that stuff. And that's the thing is we're not, like other problems online, if we're modern hip, is we use the hive mentality. We throw it out there, the hive mentality looks at it, and the hive mentality comes up with solutions for it. But it's all built on structure so everyone else can do the same kind of referral. You can't do that in the Bigfoot community because you've got these A personalities that are more hung up on, again, their identity, their fameness. Why do people lie? That was asked me the other day a few times. Come across that TV show Catfish. People are lying to each other all the time. And why do they keep lying? Well, because they're caught in a lie. And you have to keep, you frame it in such a way that it seems like you're not lying. Well, I didn't really lie to the person. Everything I told them was true. Yeah, except for the important part, which is the picture you showed them at the beginning of them to start the conversation was never your picture. So they can frame it any way they want. There's no reason to me that we shouldn't have them on film. I'm more like Thomas. It's like I'm starting to doubt the existence because of the bad structures or the bad capacity of people not being able to provide the right stuff. I can't blame them for that, other than try to point out I can't or to point out what the problem is. I'm not pointing the problem out to, like, when you're trying to educate people, and you guys know this, you're not trying to educate them by giving the answer. You're trying to educate them by pointing the direction they need to go to help the thing that whatever topic is to move forward. And I find it like frustrating to me, like especially right now, like if there's any time I probably get a phone call where it's Murphy's Law is I can't walk now, like that's at this time. I can't get up there to do the groundwork on stuff like that. But again, I don't understand the idea of if you can't find them in the snow, if you find a good track in snow, you can follow it for miles. I don't give a shit who you are. If you're a tracker, you can follow tracks in the snow for miles if you know what the hell you're doing. And any tracker will tell you the same thing. I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. But sorry, you guys, about the stuff, but it's that frustration that comes in with, like when it dealt with BFRO last year or on Sultan account. It's like, for God's sake, you're saying it's the best 2020 trackway of 2020? Like, are you kidding me? They're moose tracks. If they were the best trackways of 2020, I would be able to follow them. I would get a helicopter. I would track them. I would track them and find out exactly for miles and miles and miles. See, that's not thinking. That's not even crazy thinking. If you're following a moose, you can follow a moose in the bush for miles and miles and miles in the snow. Miles and miles and miles in the snow. They might go on to. Most people have no idea that most animals will go on logs. They don't walk on the forest floor. Why? Because it's easier to walk on logs. It's less energy spent to walk on logs. So it's not strange that a soft-padded animal will be walking on trees. But you can't tell that, or if you don't know what the hell you're looking for. And that's what frustrates me. And I think that's. Sorry, I'm going to want to rant for a bit here.
Well, it's frustrating, Leon, because Matt Moneymaker and BFRO jump to their conclusions without looking at the evidence. You went there and you looked at the evidence and you did the proper investigation on the site and you determined and you found the proof that they were moose tracks. Right. So what did Matt Moneymaker and them do? Did they come out and confess? Well, Leon's right. We were wrong. Boy, do we have egg in our face? No, they just went silent on the whole thing. And that's just the way it continues to go. I like what Bill said a while ago. The evidence for the existence or non-existence of Sasquatch probably will be determined by a group out there doing research on other matters that have nothing to do with this whatsoever.
Right. No, and I've mentioned that to you before. It'd be some 14-year-old that has no interest at all. He's 400 pounds, sucker, and it come across.
To me and guys like Keenan, you should be out there all the time doing it. Well, you saw in that clip where he was sitting on that hillside. You ever go there in an Alberta winter? And Keenan was sitting there on that spot in January. He would have had to be standing on his own shoulders, and then you would only see the top of his hat.
Right. You got to remember, when I'm talking about tracks, I'm talking about tracks in the snow in my location, because I know my location. My location is not like your location. We don't have tiger. Right? We don't have tiger jungle there. We've got, like you guys have there. We have here lodgepole pine, which means lots of sand. Everywhere we got sand because we have massive, and so when the snow falls, we have these islands of trees, lodgepole pine trees that are very narrow and very thin. So you can keep a track on the view. And like I said, I have friends who are pilots in their helicopter. Like, well, there's a helicopter right behind me here. There I am. I'm in the cockpit. There I am. In that picture. But the bottom line is, I will get a fucking helicopter and I will follow the bloody tracks. But don't sit there and waste my bloody time. And this is the thing that we're talking about. That's why I appreciate about Sasquatch and a few other people, because there's very few people that that I put back. It is because they're doing the damnedest to try to be truthful and stuff. I appreciate Bill, and the nice thing about the Bootwa boys is we would expect that if we ever claimed anything about Sasquatch, you release the hounds on us. We don't have a threat about that, in regards to us. If we're claiming it, we wanted to see if the evidence stands, because the evidence will stand on its own. But for God's sake, do your due diligence and don't just pretend that, because you're going on for the ride, because Keenan's right, is a lot of people do enjoy, like Nikki, and I do too. I was hoping to get out to see these guys in their camp out this year in Alberta Sasquatch, but because of the incident that happened with me, I couldn't get out there. But just to hang around with other people that are like-minded, where you can talk and hang out in the bush and chat, you can get some good insights. A lot of great pictures that I've come across that are clear pictures, like Bill's talking about. You can see that there's Sasquatches in some of these pictures that I've met when I've traveled around North America to look at people. They don't show anybody else these pictures. They won't show anybody this evidence. So so what do? I don't have the right to take the pictures. I don't have the right to show the pictures. I don't have the right. But I mean, it's not like you have to look at it and like, that is a circle and think, well, that's a Sasquatch. It's obviously a Sasquatch. You can see it's sitting right on a rock. It's not like blurry. It's pretty crystal clear. I want those. I can't convince the people to just do it for the sake of me wanting to show the world that they're there or whatever. That they look. We do have clear pictures of them, but it makes me keep moving forward. But
that was my point earlier, Leon. You could have a body in the basement, but if you're not sharing it, you're not moving anything forward. And that's the thing. And again, you're right. We have a lot of crap out there because there's people on YouTube that are making 5 digits a year in advertising revenue from YouTube, selling BS on YouTube. So, a lot of people that are Sasquatch researchers in air quotes are not researching. All they're doing is they found a trend to make money. And we can all, without saying any names, we can probably think of a half a dozen without even thinking about it that are doing that. And then there are people, like you said, that believe what those people have said and are using those methods. So they're collecting bad data. And if Sasquatch exists, and again, I'm probably the only guy in this group, and that includes the people on the chat, that don't believe Sasquatch exists. So for me, if you want to talk about whether Sasquatch exists or not, it's all about the data. And
totally.
And
well,
so
back to the guy even the guy, like I got contacted this week. I should check my email earlier, but I got contacted for 2 TV shows this week. One of the TV shows wanted to know about the whole gorilla thing, the gorilla head that was found in BC and whether or not that was valid. I thought, God, I saw the picture and the setup of the guy who did that. You guys, are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and I've watched that guy's show, and I think if anyone watches the original video, it was pretty apparent that it wasn't a hoax. It was, that he was doing it as a advertising gimmick.
Yeah, for sure. That's what
Anyways,
that was.
the guys, actually, I've watched him for a number of years on different shows. Not that I'd have animals sting me just for the hell of it.
Well, guys, I'm going to take us into our next segment because we will be losing Keenan in about 10 minutes. So, as my show is called Hoaxes and Hoodwinks, I like to ask my guests what they think of certain groups or footage, different researchers. What you think? Do you think they're real or do you think it's not real? So with that, we're going to hit, well, we know this one's the hoax, but in general, what do you think about the whole Rick Dyer thing that happened and how half the community was like reeling around in individuals' claim that Bigfoot in the freezer was real? What are your thoughts on how hoaxes have impacted the community, if you want to call it a Bigfoot community?
Yeah, so for me, in my case, I remember both of these I remember these kind of in hindsight too, right? I kind of came a little bit later to the party and then I kind of found out about this a little bit later on. But I do actually remember in 2008, the Georgia Bigfoot in a freezer, right? And it was kind of on the news. It was actually on CNN, and I think the news made its way up to Canada. And the reason why it was deemed credible at the time is I think Rick Dyer actually was a police officer in Georgia at the time, right? Anyways, and then the second one, the one on the right, is the Hank one too, right? They made a
later on
documentary. Out in Texas, I think they did it. Anyways, so the part that I found the most interesting about this is that he did the 2008 hoax, then he just had a bit of a cooling off period, and then he did the next one and had just as many people jump on the bandwagon of, I think this is legitimate this time. And that part I thought was pretty interesting. In the long run, I don't think it's that harmful. I think you're just I think the entire history of Bigfoot Sasquatch is littered with events like this and publicity pieces, and I don't think they make the situation much worse off. I think it just it does a very good job of making the blood boil of a lot of individuals who are involved, because they see other people, perhaps even their friends within the community, go down that path of, maybe I think there's something to it this time. I know this guy's fooled me before, but he seems like he's gotten his life turned around. Anyway, so I think the internal politics, the internal considerations around this are more interesting and are more pronounced than the net effect elsewhere. I think these things are quickly forgotten by the public. So,
right.
Public, Kim, would you agree with me that incidents like this are one of the main reasons mainstream science just keeps the whole subject at an arm's length? I mean, there's a saying in British academia: the road to Loch Ness. It's not a good road to be on.
No,
Yeah.
no. But you know what? Do you know why the Scottish government takes the official stance that there is a Loch Ness monster? About 25 to 30 20 to 30 million pounds worth of tourism says it is real. So
Right.
annually.
Well, I did an interview with Rick Dyer, and you'll have to go back and watch that on my videos. It was a very interesting 2 hours. He did disclose a lot of stuff to me also behind the scenes, and not one thing he says is real. Okay, he's trying to come back now. They're giving him some kind of deal, and for a documentary, some kind of expedition thing, and please, okay.
Yeah, well,
nothing that's happened with him is real. He disclosed much of that on my show, and so just, if you know me, trust me, nothing he says is real, okay? And it's all about the moolah, so just keep that in mind.
Bingo. Yeah.
How about the Paul Freeman footage? I'm not going to play it because we all know.
There he goes.
There he goes. Yeah. What do you feel about the Paul Freeman footage?
So the Freeman footage is really interesting because it's actually a series of short clips. So when you watch it, it almost looks like an undisturbed video, but he actually turns it off and turns it back on something like 6 times over the course of the piece of footage that's publicly available, and you can see it on YouTube. And so that was always a point of contention. I know Thomas as well believes that there's also the possibility that it was his son in a suit, I think, as well, right? And so.
Dwayne.
Yeah, exactly. Did he have 2 sons, like an older one and a younger one? Because the younger one,
I believe so. The older one's the one that helped him out with his Sasquatch years of Sasquatch research. Yeah, Dwayne.
Yeah, because the younger one says that he remembers a time when his father came bursting through the door one time with the expression on his face, "I finally got it on film," or whatever, right? And he remembers that day, right? Because in fact, I think it's pretty close to right now, right? It's almost this must be the 28th anniversary, right? I think it's August. I think he filmed it in August 1994, right?
I don't know why I didn't.
95, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. So, anyways. I don't know. I'm not too sure. It's ambiguous enough, and it's low enough quality that could be. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I was a big believer in it, and then I met Thomas, and then he bursted my bubble. So
sorry.
I go back and forth, but I mean, I liked it. I'll just say it. I liked it for a long time. But I didn't know the history. I didn't know about the sons. I didn't know about all that in the beginning. And of course, we all change as we go through, our discoveries, from the beginning of believing everything that you see to then coming to a point where, okay, now I'm going to start checking things out and looking for stuff. And that's my whole journey to questioning things and becoming a healthy skeptic, but not believing in everything that's just pushed right into, my face and believe it's a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. But the community has just been enthralled with all these people who are wanting the clickbait, as Mark Anders and his Bigfoot. And people to this day, you will find people posting on Facebook, "Look at this. This was just released," or "My friend caught this on their game camera." And it's just the same photos that this guy has 50 different photos of this particular Bigfoot, and he's a CGI expert, and he can do whatever he's an expert at it. He can make the thing walk,
Yeah, well, Mark Anders, to his credit, isn't claiming it's real, is he?
Yeah, no, he never did. He did have short little videos, 3 to 5 minutes long, where he acts like he's a guest or he's the host of a show where they examine Bigfoot photos, and they make it seem like, "Oh, and then this one came in, and look at this, and look at the arm movement," and they talk very matter of fact, but that's it. And it's the same photos you'll see in all his different videos, and he still has his channel up on YouTube, by the way. But it's the same one. He even has a video of him doing how he morphs, how he does his CGI. So don't believe in this stuff. You have to really question things. And then we have the Jacobs creature that was in September of 2007. What do you think about that one?
Oh my goodness. Wasn't that proven to be a bear, or just like a bear with mange?
Well, there was a bunch of cubs in the area, like that photo in the far corner there.
Keenan, answer your question. Yes, it was proven to be a bear, but some people want to believe it anyway.
Right. Yeah. So the photo you have here in the bottom right, with the bent over the human.
Yeah.
I think so. That was the main photo where people were looking at that, stating that a bear couldn't hinge at the rear hips and form that triangle. I think that was one of the main things at the time. But
if you could look at that picture without the man superimposed on it, you'd see the bear's butthole looking right at the camera.
Yeah. It is. We're moving on. This is a very famous Wild Creek Lagoon Bigfoot, July of 1995. This one was said to be done by a ranger, taken by a I had his name. I might have to break out my Bigfoot book.
Oh, it's gone out of my head too. I know him.
Oh, you know him?
Yes. Cliff Crook.
Yes, you got it before I could break out my Bigfoot book of shame.
Yeah. Cliff is the one that released these pictures publicly, claiming an anonymous ranger gave it to him.
Yeah, he had like 6 photos, and then he released one, and then several years he released the other one. But it's kind of like the same photo at a different angle, and but many say it was just a figurine from like a train set.
Yes, it's been used in other photos as well.
Yeah. This is the Silver Star Mountain photo. This is one of Brent's. Brent, are you still there? Or are you eating chips?
I think he's gone.
Actually, we're supposed to be asking Keenan his opinion on these. So let him answer it.
I don't remember this one. Were these just still photos, or were these stills from a video?
I believe they're all photos. Yeah, and it's just a popular area there in Silver Star Mountain that supposedly they're saying it was a Bigfoot and that it was in this far off area, but in fact, it isn't a popular area where people like to go and slide. What do you call it? Sled down.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us think it was just a person that was in a hoodie that was up at the top.
Honestly, look at there you go. If that's a Sasquatch and it's in snow and there's no trees there whatsoever, and you excavated beside it to verify it's a Sasquatch footprint, you could follow that for like
right. Right. Well, Brent would come on. He could tell you all about it, but hello.
He's not doing something. No. There you go, Brent.
Nope.
Letting us down. Well, look at this.
Failing.
He's there with a joint problem. He's got zip chimpanzee.
Bueller. Okay, one more minute, and then we're gonna have to say. But this is the Marble Mountain Bigfoot footage, and I'm not gonna play it. You guys have all seen it before. We all know that it was, there was a group of kids that were down at the bottom, and then they look up, and way off on the mountainside, there's this person or creature.
You also mentioned the fact the kids were in a campsite looking at a lead shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you watch the footage of the footage of the shelter on the close-ups, there are lashings with rope. White and red rope are used as lashing for the shelter. So
yeah,
that's Bigfoot probably doesn't go down to Rona or Home Depot to get his
and a fire pit with rocks.
Yeah, for me it was all about, I swear I could see the jacket, I could see the backpack, the small backpack on his back. So I never once thought it was a Bigfoot, but I think it was all just, for the sake of the kids, just some thrill or
Well,
whatever.
I think it was some guy upset that these kids were in his camp.
Could be. It could be. But hey, I want to thank Keenan for coming and join us tonight on Hairy Man Hoaxes and Hoodwinks, and for telling his story, his encounter. It was great. It was scary. And yeah, I don't think I could have somebody touching me in the head and not lose my marbles. So we thank you very much for coming. I know you got to be somewhere else. So any last thoughts, Keenan?
No final thoughts. I just wanted to thank you all for your time as well, and it was really great to catch up with Thomas and Leon, who I haven't spoke with a while, and it was a pleasure to meet you, Nikki and Bill and Brent. So the pleasure was all mine, and I hopefully we can do this again in the future. Maybe we'll wrangle that Justin character into, and we'll have a big group chat here.
Oh, absolutely. I would be thrilled. And, I did try to get a hold of Justin, but he's a very busy dude, apparently. So,
yeah, it his to be fair to him, to his email inbox and his Facebook inbox are completely overrun with people trying to, what Leon says to, look at this photo. What is this? What is this?
Yeah.
Eventually your brain you just don't engage with, except for the 5 people on Facebook, and it's just it's hard, it's tough, but yeah, you just can't get back to all those people, and eventually you start to shut down, especially when you get tired of all the noise, the junk.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
that's it for me.
Yep.
See you.
Well,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you so much. And I hope to see you again on the show. Anytime you feel like you want to jump on. Sundays 5 this time, every Sunday, hopefully every Sunday. But we have a topic you want to jump onto, feel free. Just send me okay. Thank you so much, Keenan, for coming.
Bye.
Bye. Well, that was really great. I really had a good time with this one. And what do you have to say, Leon? What did you think?
I thought it was good.
Yeah.
I'd have to disagree about certain people he was quoting in regards to Spawn theory. This person has no idea what they're talking about in regards to Spawn theory, but not that, in my opinion. But yeah, no, I thought it was good. I appreciate Bill's challenge back a bit there too. I think it's important that people are doing that kind of stuff. So
absolutely.
I mean, I do go, because it is so, like he's talking about this. I haven't answered any. I keep in these emails. I haven't answered anybody. Because it's just like, oh my God, like I can't keep pretending that this stuff is good. It's not good stuff. I don't know why you keep sending it, because people do, and they mean well, and they're caught in this.
They do.
This world of, this is exciting because it is addiction. I mean, I was there, when I first started this thing.
By the way, I wanted to ask, but for some reason I kept losing the signal when we started it.
Yeah.
Were there any footprints? What did he say? Did anyone ask if there was any footprints around the next morning when they got up?
No.
He told me that 2 years ago. There was no sign of anything being around. Yeah.
Right. And again, this is what I'm talking about. Again, most people I harp on tracks a lot in regards to looking at tracks. Is how can you not tell? Like some of the pictures just today. How can you not tell that those are not Sasquatch tracks? Like, I mean, how do you know what you're looking for? Like when you're walking in moss, like you guys have out there, where it's compressed, you only got a few hours before it's back up to where it was. How are you going to tell what kind of animal's doing that? How are you going to tell what kind of animal's walking across leaves? How are you going to tell in regards to looking at knowing how, like I can't train people to look at ground. I have to educate them how to look at the ground so they see the ground differently instead of this is just the ground kind of thing. And I don't find that many people know what the hell they're even looking at, other than the hope. And the hope's projected on pareidolia onto what they're looking at, saying, well, look, if this is a Sasquatch print. No, you got double bear print there. I'm sorry. And then don't get mad at me because I told you what you asked me to tell you.
Right. And that's what happens. You can't criticize anybody, yet they're publicly putting it out there, for that reason.
And they're asking you specifically, what do you think about it? I think, I'm sorry, but well, could you say it more gently? Well, I can say it more gently, but it's second cheese the fact that what I'm saying to you, you still have to listen to me because you're upset because it's not what you're hoping it to be.
I know. I had a guy sending me pictures of a bird's nest in a tree. and it was a Sasquatch.
Are you sure?
And I'm like, guy,
Sasquatch
that,
egg?
are
Blue?
you sure? You're saying that's a Bigfoot hanging there or what? And
Yeah,
because it was one of those community type of nests where a bunch of them
yes.
put on
Like stork nests, they're all over the place. They're
I'm like, no. And finally I had to say, okay, I've had enough. Stop sending me photos. You know, you can stop now, is what I actually texted to him. And he's like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, really. I've seen enough, you know. I appreciate you sending them to me, but I'm done, you know.
Well, who's that guy that was on? I think Pat was on a show with Ron. What's his last name?
Moorhead?
What's that?
Ron Moorhead?
No, it's not Ron Moore. He does a lot of documentary, but he's not a skeptic as much as he I like to have him on the Bookwire show, which is when you talk to him, he tells you what you should be doing.
You mean hijack?
No, not Doug. I know Doug too, but no, I can't remember his name. I'm going to be talking to him this week. But he was on. He's done a lot of show. He was on Snake Oil with me in that documentary we did on
Pine. Wait, why do I want to say Pine?
Ron Pine? Is it Ron Pine? But he's always
Ben Radford.
Yeah, well, maybe
Ben Radford.
That's it. Yeah, his mentality is the mentality we need in the Bigfoot community. As far as what should be modeled to us, which is he looks at it like, look, it's not. It's like when Thomas says, it's not good enough evidence, even if you did see a Sasquatch. If you're not going to do the right techniques, there's no use pretending and keep filling the airways with this garbage lingo, because it's not helping out the issue. We don't need another 500,000 pictures of blurriness with red circles. We need nobody to put anything online for 6 months till somebody gets something that's cool that everyone can look at and say, holy shit, that will fuel us to look better. Bill's right. I'm at the point now too where 50 years, you guys, over 50 years in Western culture, and you keep finding this book. Like I found out the other day that, we talked about UFOs and stuff like that, and people go and they quote, well, we used to have those Foo Fighters in World War II, and those were UFOs. No, they weren't. They were done by the Germans. No one, hardly anyone knows that information, but boy, they just swear left, right, and center as far as UFOologists or whatever they're called, because they want to believe so badly that they don't want to look for the research to find out how that actually is. And the Brits have known about it for years, and they've had their own scientists on it, what that's all about and stuff like that. Or people who believe in, like when the U.S. was looking at making a hologram of the Virgin Mary over Cuba. Did you guys hear about that?
No.
You guys talking about doing that? The reason why they did that was to stop the Soviets from being there, and they thought they could do mass hysteria because Cuba was Catholic, and if they could have a picture of it looks like Mary appear in the clouds,
right?
And that technology is being worked on right now even today. So. You can sit there and say this all conspiracy oriented thing. No, it's a American military. Why is it that these UFOs that the TikTok they found, they all knew the exit location to leave the area, every one of them. So if they're UFOs, how would they know that information? That's classified information. Well, because they have special insight. Well, it's kind of funny. No, they're all like the same location that the jets all exited. They all went to the same rendezvous point. And the fighter jet people don't. Well, how would they know that? Well, it sounds really good, but you got to do your research to figure out what the hell.
What is
the first time the U.S. has used UFO stuff as an excuse to hide data and information? But
wow.
Anyway, sorry, I'm off topic.
So, Thomas, what final thoughts?
Well, I'm just glad that serious research that are dedicated individuals carrying on in Alberta, because for many years I was there and I was all by myself. Vladimir was a senior citizen back then. He basically did the academic stuff, and I did the field research at the time. And we were the only ones, other than people who were under the radar doing it on their own and not saying anything, which I met very few of when all the years I was there. But now I'm glad to see, because Alberta it's got to be a hardier species of Sasquatch in Alberta because the winters there are long and brutal.
Wow.
Long and brutal. Summers are great, but the winters are long and brutal compared to the West Coast.
How long are the winters from month to month?
Well, they got a beautiful Forest Service road going all the way south from Cochrane all the way up to Edson called the 940 Trunk Road. You usually can't even get on that until the end of June.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because of snow.
And
it all depends how warm it gets and how early it gets higher. But unlike here, that place, unless you're on a snow machine, you're not going to get in there until late June. And you're very lucky if it hasn't all been blocked off by Halloween. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Minus 50.
Mm-hmm.
Minus 50 with the wind chill.
Bill?
When I lived there 22 days.
Any final words?
Yeah, first off, before I say my final words, nice to see Cryptids Canada on here. She has one of the websites that I like listening to the stories. So again, like I said, last week, some of the stuff I listened to for for research, but some is just for pure enjoyment. So she does a lot of good stories. So something to listen to. Mm-hmm. As far as final thoughts, and maybe as Leon's figured out by now, I really like analogies. It's one of the things that I deal with. And when you look at today's Sasquatch research on a whole, it's like in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, a lot of scientific thought was based on the writings of Aristotle. And Aristotle, when it came to things such as anatomy, was wrong on a lot of stuff. And a lot of the science at the time, they would base their science on what Aristotle said, and they would take what he said above what their own eyes could see, especially when it came to anatomy. And he had believed in Adam's rib and that, and you had the learned people that were bypassing what any soldier could tell you about anatomy. They ignored. And I think that's a good point of what Leon talks about is the mass or the majority of people on the Bigfoot world, they're believing what they're told even when it goes against what their own eyes are seeing.
Yeah.
And whether that's because they don't know what to look for or they've just been convinced that somebody in authority knows better than them. And I think, again, we got to have better evidence, and also people think for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Get the knowledge, get the training, use quality. If you want to learn about tracking, find a guide in your area or an experienced hunter that knows what they're doing. If you want to know about, digital photography, take some classes at your community college, learn about this stuff, get the information, so you're not just repeating something that came from a person that you believe is an authority. And that includes us, question everything we say because, we don't know everything.
Right. Leon, any final thoughts?
No, I've ranted enough.
You've Brent, any final thoughts? I think Brent got lost. You're fired. Guess
probably
what?
Sleeping. He's
Boom.
Pilates 411 the next episode.
He's out. He's out of here.
I knew this was going to be a good show because Bill is freshly shaved and groomed today.
Looks good.
Oh gosh. Well, hey, I appreciate you guys coming over here and joining in the conversation. And it was a great show. I really appreciate it. And hope to see you guys in the chat. I love you. I do. See you soon.